This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, I can start maybe by sharing my screen. Let's see. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. Yeah, please let me know if you can hear me clearly and if you can see the screen fine or not. And thank you for inviting for a short talk during the Commodore Users Europe. So I started with a few slides I made about this thing that I put together called Oscar64 double P. What does it stand for? It stands for, it's a preprocessor for Oscar64. So then you may wonder, what is Oscar64 that I made a preprocessor for? Well, it's a C compiler. It compiles to the Commodore 64. It compiles PLG files. And it runs on the Windows and Linux. And it's actually pretty nice C compiler that I discovered lately. And there's pretty good support for it. There's a person calling himself Dr. Mortal Wombat, and he reacts really quickly to questions when you're using his C compiler. You should give it a try if you like to do some coding for the C64. Besides that little commercial for Oscar64, let's talk a bit about Oscar64 preprocessor. So why did I make it? Well, I was creating a game. It's called Snake Escape 64. And I went through a whole bunch of C compilers before I was happy. I started really with something called, I think, CC65. That was a bit slow. It was nice, but it was a bit slow. Then I landed on kickc, which I really liked because it was really, really quick. Except that when the program became bigger and bigger, the compilation time became longer and longer. And at some point, I couldn't really develop the game anymore because, the compilation time was more than 50 or 40 or 50 minutes. And that made it just really painful to work with it. So I sort of paused my game. And then I found some guys on Discord talking about this thing called Oscar64. And I thought, okay, well, let's try it. I was more or less happy with it, but I was missing some features that kickc had. So what are those features that I was missing? And let me just show you quickly so you maybe can get an idea what I'm talking about. So here's my project for, let's see if this is the right one. Yeah, for kickc. And if I open one of the files, and if I search for the, and excuse me for the very messy coding, but if I search for this part, here you see it's doing some magic coding using kick ASM, and it can include a PNG file directly in your C file. So it's directly converting your PNG to some binary data, which you can use in your Commodore 64 program. And I really built my whole game on this feature, really, but it wasn't there in Oscar64 preprocessor. So then I thought, well, it doesn't seem to look that hard, really. This is just JavaScript. So why don't I just enable Oscar64 to include JavaScript? And that's exactly what I did. And this is what my preprocessor program is all about. So let me continue with the next slide then. So yeah, it's a tiny preprocessor script. It takes some C code and it has embedded JavaScript code in it, and it executes that JavaScript while you compile it to create more C code. and it stores this generated code in a generated folder. And then it calls the Oscar64 C compiler. It wraps around it and to more or less compile the resulting code. And just like the main compiler, it also runs on Windows, Linux, and whatnot. So some use cases, some reasons why I use it. Well, I like to create some of the data algorithmically because it goes much quicker than doing it on the Commodore 64 itself. I did that before, but then I was waiting like a whole minute before I could start my game. So this is one of the reasons. Another reason is the very handy importing pictures into the code. This PNG file example, which I just showed you in ClickC. Why do I need those actually? Well, you can use it for many things. Character sets, sprites, title screens, and so on. So how does it look like? Well, all JavaScript is supported, and you have some special keywords. So here's an example. Here is just normal C code starting with jar, cross, square bracket 256 to define more or less an array in C. And then it defines it. And then in there, I put a comment. And the comment starts with, well, as comments start with a slash asterisk. But then after there, I got an exclamation mark and CGGS, so code generation for using the JavaScript language. And then you can put anything behind it on the line. I just put a lot of dashes there to make it easy visually to separate from the rest of the code. And here's just some JavaScript. Const amplitude is 127. It does some stuff with the mat library. It more or less calculates the values for cosinus. And it returns those back into the main C file by using the .byte command. And yeah, this is more or less how it works. It's pretty simple, really. So here's another example. Another thing you can do with it, load a picture, as I mentioned earlier. You can load bitmaps, just like the one you see here, that only have one color or two colors. You can also use bitmaps that have multiple colors. But in this example, it's only using one color or two colors, sorry. So how does that work? Well, it has a few library functions built in, this Oscar64pp or double P. So load picture, and then you can just point to a PNG file. And then you need to go with two for loops more or less through the Y and the X dimension of the picture, and you need to do some magic here by figuring out the coordinates, and then you can use this when you have this picture object, you can do a get 8 monopixels command, which more or less gives you a byte back. And this is the way the Commodore 64 memory is more or less organized for monochromatic pictures. Each bit in the byte is a pixel. And yeah, then you can use again this byte command, or in this case the H byte command, because it wants to return an hexadecimal byte. You can choose if you want that, or if you just want decimal values, it's up to you. And then you can use it. The picture here above is what I'm loading. So it's just a character set, which I can use for my game. Then how to call it, the preprocessor? Well, you need to have Node.js installed because it's a script created in Node.js. So you type node, the path to the Oscar64pp, then the path to Oscar64 binary, Then the temporary part where it puts all of those files that are being generated from the original files. Then all of the other options that you will pass to the Oscar64 compiler, like -i to include something, -i to include something, another folder, -o for the actual output PLG file. And after that, all of the source code files, which will be transformed using the preprocessor. Yeah, okay, so let's do a small demo. Let's see if I have it prepared. Okay, so here I checked out the Oscar64 preprocessor from GitHub. And what you see in here, you got 3 files. You got the preprocessor itself, some README, and a folder called tests. So let's go in that folder. Let's see what's in there. So I can more or less just build the test by running this script. But let's quickly have a look at how they look like. These tests, they're in the source folder. Here it is. Here is, here are the tests. So this is more or less like what you've seen on the slide as well. So here it's defining an array and it's creating data, sinus data here with some JavaScript encode using the .byte. There's another example doing the same for the cosinus function. And at the end, the example you already saw here for getting the, loading the picture. And in this main file, main function, I don't actually use it, but I just want to see if it can compile with this test. So let's run the test and let's see what's the resulting code. So if I run it, and if I do a press -x, maybe you know this or maybe not, but it will show what is the commands inside of the script. So I'm running this and okay, so a bunch of output. Let me show you quickly what it does. This is the first command. Here it's running the preprocessor with the path to the compiler, with the path to the folder for the temporary files. And here's all of the other parameters. And here's then the list of files it's compiling. It's only 1 file now, but it could be many. When you run it, it shows you more or less, it's Oscar64pp. This is the version. Okay, it likes Commodore. It tells you where it puts the files, all of the files you specified, the compiler path, etc. So then it runs and it goes through all of the files, and here's only one. So file 0 of 1, which is this one. And each time it finds these directives for this preprocessor, it will create a line looking like this, executing so many lines of Node.js or JavaScript code to generate C code. And it's in this particular place in the source file where you can find this. And the resulting of this was 256 bytes of data, which is actually exactly what we saw before. We look on the source here, and then we look on how many bytes of data we wanted is 256. So that seems to match. And let's look at the output then. So in the build folder, I got the gen folder. I generate the code. Okay, this is how it looks like. It uses pragmas everywhere to refer back if there's an error in the generated code to which it was the file and which is the line number. And you see it doesn't just show the file name, it shows both file names, so the generated one and the original one. This is original C code. This is generated C code. Then there's another pragma, generated C code, etc., etc. And you see there's lots of numbers there. And here where the character set is imported, you may remember that I mentioned it was using the H byte operator. So these are in hex. It doesn't need to be, but you can choose this if you want or if you don't want. Okay, let me quit this and show you. Right. So this is then the game I am having been converting. And let me show you how I use it in practice. Let's see if I find something here. So one of the things really that I was also using it for, besides graphics data, also sound data, where it was pretty handy for. Well, as you see, I need to define this function. So this is where the example comes from. Then let's see if I can find. Right, okay, so here I find the first example to make the sound if the player is dying. So a whole bunch of code, and here it outputs the waveform, some information on event, the frequency, and the pulse width. Both outputting bytes, but it can also output words. So these are values that can be higher than 255. Okay. So what is it there left to show then? Right, okay, so where can you get it? Well, you can find it on my GitHub account. It's also in the invitation of this this meeting. And here you can just go to download the zip, and you just need to unzip the folder anywhere really on your disk. The scripts are made for Linux, but you can surely convert them to Windows if you want. And this is not the Oscar64pp.js script. This is working on all platforms. It's the test scripts that I'm talking about. You have some dependencies. You need to have Node.js. You need to have PNG.js. If you go into the README here, it will tell you how to install it. It's just typing one line of text into the terminal. And of course, you need the Oscar64 compiler. And well, then the question sometimes comes up, at least I see it very often in Twitter and on Discord and everywhere. I mean, is using a C compiler for programming a C64 any good? Well, I can't answer that for you. I guess there's a lot of people that like it. There's even more people that like to compile, make projects in assembly for the C64. For me, there are some pros. It's easier than assembly, but that's just because it's easier for me. Maybe someone who's a wizard in assembly thinks otherwise. I was more familiar with it, and it actually does work to create a C64 program with it with a reasonable effort. That was a big plus for me. And there is reasonable support for the hardware. So this is really, more or less why I went the C road. And then in the end, I stumbled on Oscar64 and why I created the Oscar64 preprocessor. So yeah, that's all more or less I want to say about this. If you have any questions, you can ask now or just contact me later if you want. And thank you for listening.
Well, thank you. Thanks a lot, Dusty. I have again this.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions actually, or maybe just no, not a couple, just one. I see this Oscar64 the compiler itself is not open source. It's quite recent, I think. Or at least I see that it's quite a practical project because I see now on the page from Mortal Kombat they even have commits from today, right? So why not getting in touch with them and trying to include these new functionalities directly in the original Oscar 64?
Yeah, I may actually do that at some point, may I offer, but I'm not sure if I'm really going to be any help. I mean, making a compiler is much more complicated than making a preprocessor. I mean, so this is it. I mean, I would love to try to help, but I have to see how that one goes.
Okay. Good, thanks. I don't know if there are other questions. Looking at the chat, I don't see.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I really found it super interesting because I kind of went the same way of being a JavaScript developer myself, moving to write in C code for the Commodore Amiga. And I had the same exact thought, like, why is it so difficult to include binary graphic data into a C program? I just want to include the C PNG file and be done with it. So no idea that there were other people doing similar things. So it's super interesting to see. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, you're happy to you know, copy and hack it and make it your own thing if you want and do something like that. But yeah, I mean, for me it was a sort of extension of something I've been doing on the Amiga. Like it feels like 1,000 years ago. But so there was also coding on C, and I also wanted to expand the language a little bit because I wanted to do a few things that it didn't do out of the box. So I created also a preprocessor there. And when I saw this, I was thinking, well, let's make another one. Okay. Well, thank you for the question.
Many thanks, Dusty. I will stop the recording now.